We are back at Tarpon Fishing Outfitters, and today we're going to talk about crappie. We're at the end of January, and this is an important season. Crappie time. A lot of people don't fish for crappie, but they're excellent to eat. They're in almost every lake in the neighborhood of Pinellas and Pasco and Hillsborough County. They're fun to catch. They're unique fish. And if you haven't eaten one, I recommend you go try and catch one. Crappie love brush piles. So anywhere you go, if there's brush piles in the lake, you're most likely at this time of the year, you're going to find crappie around them. So let's start with rods. A crappie rod, I actually got the Mr. Crappie rod. That's a Mr. Crappie rod. This is called the slab shaker. And why do you have a special rod for crappie? Well, no special reason, except for you have to have a really soft tip. You can see how soft that is. And the reason it's so soft is crappie have paper mouths. And if the rod has a fast or a very heavy action in the tip, it's going to rip the lure right out of their mouth. This is a 500. This is a Shimano Sienna that we sell here. On that rod, it's super light. And you're going to put either 2, 4, or 6 pound test. Braided line has a tendency to rip the mouth open wide and you wind up losing the fish. So I strictly would tell you only to use monofilament, but I have a secret. I use fluorocarbon line. Now, monofilament has some stretch. Fluorocarbon has a little less stretch. Braided line has no stretch. With crappie, you kind of want to have the stretch in the line. So monofilament is probably your best choice if you needed stretch. If once you get the feel of it, you can switch to fluorocarbon. And the reason I use the fluorocarbon, and this is 6 pound vanish, is because they do get very weary of stuff like line. This is invisible under the water to them. So I like to use about a 4 to 6 pound vanish line. That's a fluorocarbon line. The next most common way to fish for crappie, the most effective way, is live bait. What else? So you want to get a hook, a really thin wire hook, something like this Mustad. I believe this is a 4, and that's perfect for crappie. If you want to use a jig with a live bait, you would get something like these, one of these small tiny crappie jigs. It's got nothing on it, no plastic tail, no mirror, no bucktail. And what you want to use, a piece of bait, a live bait. A lot of people use worms, some people use insects. The best bait for crappie is the Missouri minnow. Mostly bait and tackle shops that sell live bait will have Missouri minnows at this time of the year specifically for crappie. Remember that, the Missouri minnow is the best live bait for crappie. Put on this hook and then this jig, either or. If you're going to use lures for crappie, I got an assortment out here. Almost anything works as long as it's tiny. This is the Crappie Slab Daddy. This is just a bucktail jig in a small size. And if you can notice, the colors are bright. Crappie love bright colors. They love chartreuse and orange and whites. The next one is just a plastic tail that you would put on a jig head. Instead of putting a live bait on this, you can put this chartreuse little plastic tail on it. That's a crappie bait. Works great. Notice the color, bright. This is an excellent crappie bait. This is a bucktail. Very small, very tiny, thin wire hook. They also love, and this is probably one of the most common for crappie, it's the beetle spin. A small spinner bait made for crappie. It's got a plastic tail on it, and it's got looks like a Colorado blade at the top, which puts out some vibration. So if the water is a little dirty, and they can't see as well, the vibration will help you locate some crappie. Another bait similar to that is the Roadrunner, made by Blakemore. Another excellent crappie bait. And the last thing is everybody's heard of rooster tails, meps, and panther martins, and those are basically inline spinner baits, all small. They work excellent for crappie. And lastly, this is my favorite because I catch a lot of bass on this when I'm crappie fishing. This is a little crankbait called the Bitsy Minnow. This is awesome for crappie. It works really good. The hooks are really thin. Crappie inhale this whole thing. Now, one thing about crappie is they're delicious to eat. Throw them on ice, and I like to bleed them immediately. Get home, and they make a delicious meal. Crappie and eggs, it's the way to go. Thank you for listening. Come to Tarpon Fishing Outfitters. We'll hook you up with all the crappie stuff you need. This is not a crappie lure, as you can see. Just making sure everybody knows that. And I got to remind myself, that's a little too big.